Hello and welcome to my Let's Build series. I'm Tim and I am hoping to recreate the university from Patrick Rothfuss The Name of the Wind as part of my PB 6008 Literature and Digital Age project. What you're seeing now is the landscape in which I'm going to create my digital adaptation by reading the book, taking details from it and imagining how that would translate to the visual world. Of course, certain aspects are going to be changed, as Linda Hutchin herself mentioned, that there will be changes across different media platforms. So, let's get started. I began by creating roads inside of my world, so that I could get a sense of where I was going to put each and every building. I had already taken preliminary actions on putting down coloured wall blocks so that I could have a rough idea of where I was going to place each building. Of course, none of these were fixed, as depending on the scale of each building, and because the Minecraft scale is very different to human scale, as 2 blocks in height is the same as your character, I decided to use sandstone as the main material that I was going to use for the roads, because as I was checking out the map and cutting through the mountains as to where my original road was going to be, I encountered sandstone within the core of the hill and thought that it looked perfect for a modern and civilized world such as the university. I also ensured that there was a large square courtyard, but inevitably using the wand tool to change the material from grass to sandstone was much more difficult at first, as I had only just started using the program. Unfortunately, there was a moment in which I was unable to record my planning of the archives, the first building that I was going to create. Due to technical difficulties with my Cam Studio mod, I was finding that Minecraft wouldn't allow me to record on various occasions, and the only way to fix it was to continuously turn my client on and off again. However, you can see here that I've mapped out the general shape of the archive. I went by 64 squares wide on either side and about 32 squares up. Now, whilst the book described the archives as featureless, grey and square as a block, larger than 4 granaries stacked together, no windows, no decorations, and only one set of great stone doors, 10 times 10,000 books. Having finished all 4 walls and capped it with a roof, effectively I had recreated the archives as described in the book. However, I think everyone can agree that when put onto a visual platform such as Minecraft or gaming, a featureless grey square is very dull and boring. Therefore, I needed to build it up and add more detail to it, whilst keeping in mind that certain aspects of this massive archive need to be kept intact. I started off by thinking of how I wanted it to look. I ended up deciding to go with steepled arches that you kind of see in cathedrals, particularly around Bath. I then decided to experiment with how that would look using a combination of stone and cobblestone steps. Once I had a rough idea of how I wanted it to look, I recreated that in several places before using the World Edit tool to copy and paste them further along. Unfortunately, from my original source, the size of them was too large and they were overstepping the boundaries of the square itself. However, I thought that I might be able to turn this into my advantage, so that instead of having a big square, I'd then be able to carve out a little bit of extra detail outside of it by creating arches that came off of the building. For the roof itself, I decided to use stone steps in an attempt to further ensure that the archives wasn't flat as possible. To this end, I also decided that the ceiling itself could be indented on multiple levels to create a better faceted shape. I came around to the front and added additional steeples to add a little bit more detail and get rid of some of the black rock that was showing through. I then decided that I would put a window-like structure in the middle of it, as I experimented with different signs but couldn't quite come up with a design I was happy with. And there we have it, the final design, or rather the basic design of my archives. Now I might come back at a later point to add to it and maybe make the archives a little bit taller, but for now I need to head on to the interior, which is going to be a very large build and it's going to take me a very long time to fill it with the 10,000s and 10,000s of books as described in the novel. So coming inside the archives, we can see that it's very dark naturally, so I've ended up lighting the entire area with torches and creating a pool of lava at the bottom of it, just so that I can see a little bit better. I created a division in the main room for the main antechamber where the Scriv's desk is located, and I created a separation on the left hand side where I would be putting tomes. I also created a division on the right hand side where stacks was going to be located and where the main area of the stacks would be accessible. Coming into tomes, I thought to use birchwood as the flooring because of its brightness, and as the archives was dark enough already, I thought that it would benefit it greatly. Now here you can see me playing around with various room layouts and putting in bookshelves and trying to figure out what kind of table I wanted to use. Originally I wanted to use fences and pressure plates, however I found that this didn't quite create a desk sort of feel that I was after. I also came round and installed redstone lamps into the walls, which were more acceptable because in the book flames were not allowed inside the archives for fear of damaging it. Then I just played around a little bit with the book steps just to add a more interesting effect on the bottom of them. Coming into the bottom of tomes, I realised that I had put too few chairs on the top floor, and so that if I was going to say this was going to be used by students, I'd need to add in lots of benches with plenty of chairs. I also added in a desk that would be used for other scrivs where students would go and sign their name on a ledger that would allow them to acquire books otherwise inaccessible to them from stacks. Now coming back to the main antechamber, I read the book again and decided that I needed a second antechamber, as in the book Roth describes how he enters through the great stone doors of the building and then goes through a second set of wooden doors that lead into the Scriv's building. However, I didn't want the main interior to be just a bit blank, so I ended up adding some alcoves to it to add a bit of a more interesting shape. Now, coming to the right hand side of the building, I started setting out stacks. I came and cut into the floor and put cobblestone down where the streets, alleyways and pathways would be, as stacks was more like a city than an actual library. I also decided to make the book stacks really, really large and menacing so that you constantly felt like you were being dwarfed by the great library. Stacks was always a very dark place because of the lack of bright light that came from torches or natural light. Instead, sympathy lamps were used in the novel to illuminate the space. In Minecraft, the only light that can accomplish this is the redstone torch. Now we get to the main chamber of the archives. I set the walls to coal so that I would be able to create a much darker feeling to the building, and then set about creating some support pillars for the ceiling. I messed around with the design of this for quite a while and ended up adding box shapes to various intervals on the pillar itself, but decided to leave off a more complicated design in between them as it was overcomplicating the build. In the end, I felt that they almost looked like mausoleum structures and added a bit of a solemn appearance to the main chamber. I then came around and added a main office for the Scrivs, as although we had never heard or had the chamber described in the novel, I thought that it was important that I added it in. So I created a very simple structure that was supported off the side of the wall. I then came down and started creating the main platform for where the books were going to be. Now I didn't want archives to just be a simple series of bookshelves that were going to go down floor by floor. Instead, what I kind of wanted to do was create a series of tiered layers and platforms that I would then fill up with books and winding passageways using, again, cobblestone to line out the pathways. Here you can see me messing around a little bit and adding in various platforms of different shapes at different elevations that I would then fill out with bookshelves and chairs, tables, hidden rooms, and various other things. I took into consideration in the deepest levels where I was going to hide various unique features from the book, such as the 4-plate door and also the yellowish rope knots. Building the interior of this library took a lot longer than I had expected, where creating the archive's exterior was quite easy because of the world edit brush. I found that creating the interior was much more difficult because it was harder to find big blocks of shapes that I could simply copy and paste in. Now on the left hand side you can see some black sort of buildings starting to take shape, and these are little alcoves or workplaces I thought that students would be able to use in their time of need. They'd be able to book these out or simply take a quiet room by themselves and study away into the night. Now, when I was also building bits and pieces of the bookshelves, I realised that if I used the same number in terms of height, that the library would look a bit too samey. So on lower platforms and more busy platforms where the alcoves would be, I decided to use shorter bookcases, as that would make it slightly more accessible to students and then make more sense that they're more well travelled. And whilst I was going through creating all of these bookcases, I ended up dotting around redstone torches in different places, as I knew that when I came around to removing the main torches and getting rid of all that lava, that I would need to find a way of illuminating it. For this very reason, the pillars, which are filled with them, are a bit too bright, so I came around and removed most of the redstone torches, leaving one per layer just to add a little bit of light to it. And that is pretty much it. That is the interior of the archives complete. We have the famous 4-plate door hiding inside, and here you can just see the exterior once more. It's been quite a journey trying to make this, I've got to say, and it took me a great many hours planning and building this. And when I then come back and watch this video, I don't feel that I haven't done that much work because of how fast the video's been sped up. So here we are coming through the great stone or metal doors in this case, because Minecraft doesn't really have stone doors, and coming into the main antechamber where the Scrib's desk is located. Doesn't seem like there's anyone in, so we're going to sneak right past them and go straight into stacks. As you can see, the redstone torches don't add a lot of illumination. In fact, I've brightened this video, as the only time it is really visible is when you're playing the game yourself and walking through the various bookshelves. I really like the feeling of size inside of the archives and how labyrinthine and dark it's become. I feel that this is a place you could really get lost in quite easily, and a place where you could find just about a book on just about anything that you could possibly imagine. If I had a bit more time, I would have built upwards a little bit and added some higher levels above the main entrance so that I could fill out the ceiling a little bit better. Unfortunately, I have a time restraint and need to ensure that I focus on other buildings as well as archives. Now down here on one of these lower platforms you can see that I have included the 4-plate door, which blends in seamlessly with the wall as described in the book, and it's just one of many various little Easter eggs that I have placed around the archives in different locations. The only way you're going to be able to find them is if you really look for them, which I think fits the theme of the novel in the way that Kvoth explores the library in the hope of finding the answers to his questions. Somewhere in here is information on the Shandrian and the Emir, but the only way he's going to be able to find them is if he really, really looks for it. And that may very well take him many years. And there we have it, the archives is complete. Thank you for joining me, I'm Tim, and I hope you join me for the rest of the series. Thank you.